Well, this becomes a demonstration of what we're talking about. I wrote a book some years ago entitled "Pass the Baton: The Miracle of Mentoring." And step one is, I do, you watch, we talk. Step two, we do together, and then we talk. Step three, you do, I watch, we talk, we tweak. Step four, you find another, you teach them to do, and then you talk, so that it goes into perpetuity. That's the power of it. This is about legacy. Let me see if I can give you a picture as we sort of launch into this. I am the result of this. I'm doing today what my father did. At 75 years old, he had all 6 of his sons to kneel before him. And he laid his hands on us. My dad was a businessman, not a preacher. He was a businessman. But he was an intentional father, the kind of intentional father that John Tyson talked about. He was that kind of intentional father that was one of 12 children himself, because he had an intentional dad. And at 75 years old, he had all 6 of his sons to kneel before him. He took out a vial of oil, anointed us with oil, and prayed an Abrahamic-style prophetic prayer over our lives. Though he served in the business world all of his life, yet he was a faithful deacon in the church. And he spoke, I'm doing today what my daddy spoke prophetically over my life at 75 years old. Now, let me just say, the two of us are here right now. And I want you to imagine with me for just a moment, when you really understand legacy. Imagine with me 2 big, long, grand pianos on the platform. And if I play a chord on one piano without the other piano doing anything, the same chords will vibrate on the other piano that's in the room. That is the power of a calibration of what happens from one generation to the next. It's not a fight, it's not a struggle. It is a natural thing that when we are open, that we sense it because of our proximity in the same room. We begin to resonate and vibrate with something, not fight, not struggle. Legacy is something that we set in motion. It's a power. It really is. And I wrote a book about succession planning. The only reason that you have a need for a successor, there's some bad reasons. The first one is abandonment, where the person just abandons, when daddies abandon the home. When a leader of an organization abandons, they burn out, they abandon it, they just walk off and leave it. So you have a need for succession when there has been an abandonment issue, an abandonment. Then you have need to find a new leader when there has been a scandal. Scandal disqualifies people and can displace them completely out of their place through scandal. Another one is when sickness happens. You can have a massive heart attack, an aneurysm, a stroke, and it completely causes them to be incapacitated. And now you need a new leader. So you have to have a succession. And then you could have sudden death that just takes them away. Nobody was planning on it. Everybody thought that they had more time, and the sudden death can do it. And then the 5th type of situation where you have a need for that is intentional succession. It's intentional succession. You know that it's going to happen at some point. The man who was the mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King was the president of the Atlanta Board of Education and also the president of Morehouse College. He was my dad's friend. And he stopped my dad one day and he said, Bronner, what are you doing to ensure that when you die, that your business does not die with you? And this was 30 years before my father's death. And it started my dad at that moment, 30 years prior to his death, that he started his succession plan. We knew immediately who would be president of the organization. There was no question about it. We knew what everybody's role would be. It was almost like when the Queen died. Everybody knew. They already knew the things that would go to the media. And so there we were. And so here we are. And we're in a transition process as it goes. We're in a transition process. And so I've been playing the chords and they're already vibrating in his heart. And we'll just play our instrument and get them in the same room. But there's got to be, it's the power of proximity. There is a power in proximity. When people get offended with each other, they don't want to be near you. They don't want to see you. But you've got to be able to get them in the room. And the reason that some people don't have each other's heartbeat is because they have not been in the room. And communication is not always delivered the way that we think that it is. Sometimes people live under the illusion that communication has happened when it has not. And just because you've said something does not mean something has been heard. At least not what you think that you said. So you have to have a dialogue. Dialogos is the word which literally means flow of meaning. You don't know what people have understood about anything that you've said until you have a dialogue. So whatever you teach, whatever you share, whatever you think that you've given, you have to have a dialogue about it. And it has to be very clear. It has to be well defined and then clarified, corrected, if you're going to have that to happen in an incredible way. And so this is why our conversation today, so I just want to ask my son, what does legacy mean to you? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, good afternoon. I'm just grateful to be here. This has been such a rich experience, and there's so much treasure in the room, and this is my first CMN, so I appreciate that, just the opportunity to be amongst. But legacy to me is all about continuity. It's about continuity. It's about taking something from the past and carrying it forward in the present and into the future. It's what it's not is imitation. So you're not required, just because you're a part of a legacy doesn't mean that you have to imitate and do things the exact same way. Continuity doesn't require imitation. And matter of fact, innovation is necessary for something to stay alive. So it's more about getting connected to the purpose of what was being transmitted so you can carry it forward honestly and fervently. Because there's an emptiness in imitation if you're not kind of connected to the source. So yeah, that's what legacy kind of means to me.
That's good. In that whole process of being able to sort of move that forward, I think that there has to be a clarity and understanding of what I would call constants and variables. Constants and variables. And here's why. Because if you change what you should continue, you will make unstable. And if you continue something that you should change, you will make irrelevant. So you have to know what to change. I'm going to say that to you again. If you change what you should continue, you will destabilize, you will make unstable. If you change something from the legacy that you should continue, you will destabilize it, you'll make it unstable. But if you continue something that should be changed, you'll make it irrelevant. And that's why every successor has to figure out what needs to be changed. When you look at Moses and Joshua, their leadership styles were totally different. Moses was a master negotiator. He was a diplomat. But Joshua was a warrior, because one had an anointing to bring people out of a slavery situation, and another had an anointing to bring people in, but they had to fight and dispossess. You can't negotiate somebody out of their home. You're gonna have to fight and take it. So he had a different assignment. It was a different day. And had Joshua tried to operate as his mentor, then he would have failed. He had to know what to change. Constants and variables. How do you make this relevant to each generation as it goes? The thesis in the book on succession planning that I wrote was this, is that succession planning is not the filling of a vacancy, it is the continuity of an organization. How do you keep the continuity of the identity of your family? I mean, the mark of your family, the heritage of your family, the crest of your family, who your family happens to be, the name, the reputation, the character of your family. How do you maintain the continuity of that we are men of character, that we are men of honor, that we are men of faith, that we are men of our word? How do you actually maintain the continuity of that, to know what about this do we change and what do we make flexible? And sometimes in doing that, there's a difference between what we would call meaning and form. And here's how I've noticed it. For example, in our church, you know, my generation, when a man was indoors, he didn't wear a hat inside. You see, that was very meaningful to us. We saw a hat on the indoors as a sign of disrespect. But you see, my son's generation, it's a part of their outfit. They don't think, you know, this is. They were never taught that if a woman came in, a man pulled his hat off. And see, this was the culture into which I was raised, but not his culture. And so he doesn't think anything about it. He walks in, they've got a hat on. We've had guys, you know, they've had hats. They don't think about it. Then I get emails from older people from my generation telling me how offensive it is and that these people ought to take their hats off. They don't mean to be disrespectful. They just don't understand a custom that my generation did. That's not a value of his. It has no meaning to them. It's a hat. This is part of my outfit. My hair is not fixed. Whatever the case was. Why ever they were wearing it. So it's just different. So I don't know whether you want to speak to even some of those kind of changes.
Yeah, so even things like that. Matter of fact, I had to do an experiment because I serve as his executive pastor. I'm also a worship leader at the church. And it was sort of, we had tried to get our ushers to stop policing the hat policy thing. It's just like, that's not that important. So, but they just were really holding on to it. So then what did the executive pastor / worship leader do? I decided I was going to show up that Sunday with a backwards hat and everything. And I was like, good morning, Word of Faith. Y'all ready to worship? And I have my hat on. And I could see it in my ushers. And somebody approached me and we were able to have a conversation about that. But that was the liberation for that moment. And the important thing about it is not about hats or no hats. The thing that needs to be passed down that's meaningful is we need to know about respect. We need to understand honor. Hats or no hats are just a form that's trying to pass down the meaning. So it's like, don't worry about the form so much as the meaning. We need to understand respect. It's not about hats, it's about respect. So why don't we talk about respect instead of hats? You know?
Yeah, that's, you know, see, that's incredibly rich for us, because that is the issue that we want to communicate. That's the real thing that we want to pass down, is respect. The forms will change with every generation. The forms change. But respect is a constant in every relationship, in every home, in every business, in every marriage. Respect. I mean, you can't build on anything if you don't have respect. When you lose respect, you lose effect. If your wife no longer respects you, you've got an issue. You need to have some vigorous exchanges of dissenting ideas until you have thrashed it out. So, but that has to be worked out. If you have a respect issue with a son or a daughter and their father or their mother, there has to be a respect and honor. They sort of go hand in hand. And so if you lose respect, the loss of respect can disconnect you and disqualify you. Just a respect issue, but it has to be rebuilt as an intentionality. So when you have the transition of certain things that go from the predecessor and then the successor, I mean, what are some of the tensions that you discover along in that journey, in that process?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's gonna fall at that constants and variables. It's like, how do you manage transition is somewhat like a crisis, because it's like, okay, what do we hold on to and what do we let go of? So that's the fine line of what you're negotiating, and you're kind of, it's a tug, a give and take of constant communication. It's kind of like you're asking a question. You know, if there's something I want to do, it's like, okay, is it not right now? Is it a pace issue? Because sometimes there's an issue of pace. Yeah. It's like we can do that, but just not right now. Yeah, right. So that's one of those tension points, is even timing. So there's gonna be some timing challenges. It's like, okay, we can do this, but let's just do it at a pace that doesn't like leave people behind or shock them. And it's like, okay, and then sometimes it's you might identify something as a variable that's really and say that's a variable and constant. So, and that's style and personality, like style, personality, methodology. Some of that stuff is really variable. It's not a part of the essence, right? But younger people, we have a tendency to say something is a variable that might be a constant. And older people have the tendency to identify something that's a constant and it's really a variable. Like, it's like, is it really important that we sing this song every time before we start, or can we just do something else? And I know millennials have really, and we talked about this, we're kind of at a search for meaning, because we noticed a lot of rituals, and then when we asked why, they were like crickets. So it's really, we just want to know, what is this all about? But it's a quest for meaning. And we weren't getting answers to that. And so we're trying to, it's really I don't think that we're not disrespectful. We're frustrated because we want to know why. We want to know what's constant. What is the essence of the thing you're trying to give to me? Why do we do this? And so I think that's one of the biggest tension points. Again, it's not about hats, but we do need something about respect. But don't talk to me about hats, because in behavioral modification, before we talk about something like, what's the deeper thing we're talking about? Because it's like, I know God is not really obsessed with my hat. Yeah. So it's like, is that what it's really about? Yeah. But God has something to say about respect and honor. Yeah.
You know, and that's a great point. You know, it's a little different from my generation, because what happens is that we try to do with the next generation the same thing that was done with us. And so if my parents told me something, we didn't question it. So questioning your parent, had somebody questioned my daddy, the room would have just, I mean, if my father wanted my opinion, he gave it to me. And now we have a millennial generation, and they have an opinion about everything. You know, so, and I've had to get comfortable, you know, with that. But what allows me to be comfortable in that is that I have a resolute understanding of my identity. No matter the attitudes of others, I've lived long enough. You know, I don't even pay it any attention. I'm okay. I'm copacetic about it, because I've lived. You know, as soon as they quiet down, I'm hearing frustration in their voice. So I understand that. What I understand too as a father is that there's something that I carry that he needs. And we carry something more. A lot of people think of inheritance. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That's not just about money. That's about moral value and character. It's about the spiritual inheritance of the faith that we lay into their life. I mean, you remember the Apostle Paul talking about Timothy. He says, Timothy, he wasn't the one that got Timothy saved. Timothy was already saved when he met him. He said, I know the faith that was in your mother Lois and in your grandmother Eunice. He was at least a third generation Christian. And now the Apostle Paul is finding something, but he'd never been fathered. And it was not until Timothy met Paul, until he met a father, his gifts were not released. When Timothy met Paul, something was stirred in Timothy that was released and activated that his mother Eunice and grandmother Lois had no power to activate, because he needed a man. He needed a man. Timothy needed Paul to activate his gifts. And he said, it was through the laying on of my hands. He said, now Timothy, stir up the gift of God that's on the inside of you. And you need a father's voice to ignite in the same way that that seed that raced among those 400 million to get the 8 and the light that comes on. That same father that sent that seed that gave life also sends something that activates something that a mama's voice, meow, 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 it just doesn't have the same power to be able to activate. Now, without fathers or predecessors realizing something that they have to be able to give to the successor who's coming after them. And see, just like with a baton, you've got to be willing to run behind something with nothing in your hand. With nothing in your hand. But you run behind because you know what they carry for your heart. I wouldn't follow anybody that doesn't love me. It's difficult to serve under a leader if you don't feel that they love you, because their decisions will not be in your best interest. You need to know that I'm loved by this person. It's one of the first things that needs to be established. But one of the things that I identify for fathers who feel like they don't have the resources to be able to give to their children, their grandchildren, well, so-and-so, yeah, so-and-so, my dad was rich, I'll be such a... Listen, you carry something far beyond money. One of the things, time. Time is a currency. You buy things with time. That's why we mortgage things over time. Time is a currency. There's certain things that you can buy with time. You just teach people the power of patience and time. That's something that you can pass to them. That's why a father said, no, not yet. Not yet. Because when people are being trained and when they're being mentored, they always feel that they're ready before they're ready. They always feel ready. The athlete always feels, put me in the game, coach. And it's going to always be a delay because the person the successor is always so anxious to get their hand on the baton. But the one who carries it, not yet. Not yet. They know timing. Time is a resource. Knowledge is a resource. The knowledge not only that you know, but what you carry to them. The things that my son does not have in experience, I give him through exposure. Let me say that again. What the younger generation, what a successor does not have in experience, you can grant to them through exposure. My dad's greatest gift into my life was the gift of exposure. So you buy things with the currency of time. You buy things with the currency of knowledge. The other currency is money. But listen, if you don't have money, use time and knowledge in order to produce the money. Whichever one you have. Now, if I've got money and if I need time, I use money and knowledge in order to save my time or to give me more time. So that instead of you're cutting your grass because you're making big bucks over here, if you've got money but you don't have time, really rich people, time is their greatest commodity. And so we're teaching them the value of something. You will generally carry 2 of the 3 at all times. And whichever one you lack, you use the other one in order to get it. Does that make sense to you? You carry it. So if I need money, I'm going to figure out how to take my knowledge and use time. If it can compound over time, but I got to have some knowledge, I can produce money. If I need knowledge and I've got money and I've got time, I can go to school. I can watch it on YouTube. I can read it in a book, but it's going to take you time. If you've got money, you can buy the book, you can get the resources, you can enroll in the course. You're going to have to take time. Time is a currency. Money is a currency. If I need knowledge, you take money and you combine it with time and you get knowledge. Whichever one that you're lacking, use the other 2 to get the third. Teach that to the folks that's following you, that some things take time. Some things take time. What are some of the greater concerns of what you would call a successor? What's on your mind? You know, what worries you or stresses you or makes you even question, like, am I ready? Can I do this?
Yeah, I think as a successor, greatest need is clarity on that which I'm grabbing into. What must make it there? And it's like, what's essential? What must make it over there? What is the identity of it? What is the treasure that needs to make it to the next decade, to the next, that needs to make it into the future, that needs to make it travel to different places geographically, that needs to touch more lives to where other people can participate in it, that can glean from it. It's like, where does this river, what is the essence that I need to take? So it's like, I need clarity. Is probably the greatest need of a successor is clarity on the mission, clarity on the essence. And I know that some of that it is taught, like it can be talked about in communication. It can be, we can talk about the mission. We can spell it out. We can write it on a board, right? We can create a seal on it. But a lot of it, so much happens that is unspoken. Yeah. It's like the fastest way to learn something really is, spending time with you, going with you here and there. Watching you is more, I can absorb more about your ways and about what's going on here in really that which is unspoken rather than the spoken. Sometimes I feel like we can put too much emphasis on the written word and we put too much emphasis on words. It's like presence is really more powerful than words, and it really can seal words. And so I would say presence and the idea of being in the room, being around, because more is caught than taught.
Yeah, that is the principle, that more is actually caught than taught. But again, you have to have the gift of proximity. If you're too far, you can't catch the ball. You can't be 2 football fields away and say, hey, coach, or to the quarterback, I'm open, but you're too far away. Proximity. You have to be within proximity in order to catch. That is one of the most powerful things. What frustrates people is a lack of clarity, because they don't understand. If you don't have clarity as to why your wife is acting the way she is, you get frustrated. You know why? Because I told her, and she knows that I don't like it and yet she does it, and now I'm frustrated because I don't have clarity. I thought that I was clear when I told her. Or if it's with a son or a daughter, and if you told them, and if they're not following, it's like, I know that I told them. And now I'm frustrated because I'm not seeing this come out. So here are 3 things that I have. Design. Our identity in terms of clarity comes from design. If you understand the design. So many people live the perversion of how they were raised, in the inept ways of how they were raised, instead of discovering how they were made. Our real power comes from a revelation, not of how you were raised, but how you were made. Because sometimes we were raised by people who had no concept of the God identity, of the imago Dei on the inside of you. And so it's when you understand how I was made as opposed to raised. That's design. Design. When you understand the design of a particular motor or car, you understand design, a lot of your questions are answered. Design. Number 2 is definition. Definition. And you see, the power to define is the power to determine destiny. Whoever you give license to be able to define you, confuses us. And see, we as men, if we don't get it from our daddy, we're going to create some kind of definition. We're going to get it from somewhere. Materialism says, respect me for the possessions that I own. And that's why some guys, it's the big car, it's the big house, because that defines them and their measure of their own success, materialism. For others, it is mastery. Respect me for the skills that I have developed and mastered in my life, mastery. And they get there, so I'm this because I'm a master chef. I'm a master brick mason. I'm a master, computer engineer. It's the skill that they have in their life that gives them the definition as to who they are, mastery. For others, they get it through their morality. Respect me because of the virtues that I embody. It's because I'm a goody two-shoes and that was a problem of the Pharisees. I fast twice in the week. I pay my tithes. I do, these wonderful virtues. But something was still lacking on the inside of them. And it is not until we understand the real definition that we are the sons of God, made in his image, after his likeness, that we are made with the character of God. That's where real self-respect comes from. It comes from that place. And that's the great thing is this things, I will say this as a predecessor. The most difficult thing for me to be able to convey are things that I do naturally or intuitively, instinctively. It is my natural endowment and gift. It's the hardest thing to teach because you don't have to think about it. And whenever I have had to teach something that I do by my natural gifting or by the way that I'm naturally wired, if I'm teaching it to a person and that's not their natural wiring, I'm like, can't you just do this? People who are athletically coordinated, they just know how to do things. I had an NFL player came down, he just do, and I'm like, everybody else that I brought up into this place, I said, it's like a maze. This dude navigated as though he had been in our building many times. It was intuitive, and I could tell that. But what do you do when you're trying to teach something to someone that you know intuitively? You have a natural gifting in to be able to do that, and yet, how do you teach that you've never struggled with? But if I had to learn to walk, and if I had to learn how to ride a bicycle intentionally, I can teach that more readily to others. But it is a struggle for us to be able to teach those things. And so I don't know from a successor's standpoint, whether there is something on the flip side. What does it look like from that view?
Yeah, I think that, and another thing that has to be discerned is there are things that he can do that I just shouldn't even try to do. Like there are things that he does that was made for his time that is not for me to embody. And I wasn't made for that. Again, Moses and Joshua, different set of skills, different missions, but they are also, Joshua is participating in the legacy of Moses, even though they have very different ways of being, and they have to become different types of animal. In many ways, we have similarities, but we're very different animals. And that's because our missions, the battlefield is going to be different out there. So it's like, I'm made for my generation. I'm made for my mission. So I have to understand why I'm here, and the way that I participate in the legacy is going to look different than the way he did it, right? So it's like my skills are what's required for my generation and what's required for my mission. I know that God has already equipped me with that, and I'll get lost trying to do what he does. It's like I can't wear Saul's armor. I have to use what I've been given and be very clear about my own identity and not get lost in the imitation game when I'm really called to the innovation game.
That's. I think he's got the DNA. It's just legacy is where success meets destiny, and they don't compete. Legacy. It is where success meets destiny and they don't compete. Legacy is something to be preserved. Destiny is something to be extended. There's always something to preserve. There's something to achieve, and there's something to avoid. Always. Something to preserve, something to achieve, something to avoid. Every predecessor and every successor needs to ask those questions. What should I preserve from my predecessor? What should I achieve that still yet has to be accomplished? And what pitfalls, dangers, snares should I avoid? What tests, trials, temptations that I should avoid? Well, I think all of our time has sort of slipped away. Time just, it just flies when you're having fun.